At 5 in the morning, the hospital called and told me my daughter was in intensive care with bruises and broken bones, she whispered. It was Mark and his family. I got up from my bed in the assisted living home, put on my jacket, and quietly walked out into the night. 30 years in the Army don't vanish from a man's bones, and what I did over the next 24 hours was not something they expected from an old man. Friends, one small request before we begin. Write your 60 in the comments. I'm honestly curious where you're listening to these stories from. Over breakfast, during your commute, or right before bed. A year and a half before that phone call, retired Lieutenant Colonel James Miller made the stupidest mistake of his life. He signed a document, a durable power of attorney. It was in the name of his stepson, Todd Parker, who had spent the previous 3 months slowly, carefully, drop by drop, pouring the same idea into his ears. Age catches up with all of us, Todd kept saying. Memory isn't what it used to be. Anything can happen. Colonel Miller, we're adults here. We understand how life works, Todd said one evening, pouring tea in the kitchen as if he were doing the kindest thing in the world. This isn't about trust. It's basic logistics. You're 65. Sometimes your blood pressure numbers look scary. And last week, we had that little incident with your memory. The keys just vanished. I didn't lose them. You moved them somewhere in one of your caring little bursts. There it is. Todd smiled, with the exact expression James would later remember every night in the assisted living home, lying on a state-issued bed with a sagging mattress. A conspiracy theory, right here at the kitchen table. Classic, Colonel. I've read about this kind of thing in medical articles. Let's just protect everyone. One visit to the notary, 10 minutes of paperwork, and everyone can sleep better. James signed it. 30 years in the Army, 2 tours overseas, 15 years in cybersecurity after retirement. And still he signed. Because Todd was family. Not a son by blood, but close enough to count as part of the inner circle. And in James Miller's world, people from the inner circle did not fire on you. That was what he thought. It turned out they fired first. 2 weeks later, Todd drove him to a private assisted living facility on the outskirts of Springfield, Missouri. It was a 2-story building with a faded yellow exterior and bars on the first-floor windows, surrounded by a fence beyond which stretched an empty lot full of weeds and old garages. This is temporary, Todd said back then. We'll just wait it out while I get a few things settled. Temporary stretched into 18 months. James's pension went toward paying for a bed and 3 meals a day made up of overcooked oatmeal, bland soup, and frozen fish patties. Everything else. And after years of consulting, there was a decent amount sitting in his accounts. Todd withdrew for his own needs, confident the old man would never get out and check the statements. Once a month, the stepson showed up with a bag of oranges and a box of cookies. He sat on the edge of the bed and patted James on the hand. You look great, Colonel Miller. Seriously, you look younger. Fresh air, routine, a good diet. It's exactly what the doctor ordered. The peace and quiet here is grave deep, James would say. Exactly. That's what you need right now. The doctors say there's obvious progress. A little more patience, and we'll decide where to go from here. A little more, he said, that every visit. And every visit, the phrase meant one thing. Nothing was going to change. Todd would leave, and James would stand by the window, watching his car turn around in the parking lot, weaving between puddles. He gave the oranges to the man in the next bed, 80-year-old Frank Wilson, who rejoiced over them like a child and always asked whether it was somebody's birthday. The cookies stayed untouched on the nightstand until the next visit. Then James threw them into the trash. He could no longer eat anything that came from Todd's hands. But the facility did not become his grave. James got up at 5 every morning. It was a habit hammered into him during basic training and then reinforced by 30 years of Army discipline. For 40 minutes, he worked out, wall push-ups, crunches on the hard floor, squats while keeping one hand on the back of a chair for balance. His body obeyed, not as eagerly as it had when he was 40. His joints cracked, his right knee ached after every set, but it obeyed. Then he drank the facility's weak tea and began to observe. Nurses left tablets on the reception counter. Staff members typed passwords into the internal system without covering the screen. 4 digits, sometimes 6, almost always birthdays or some combination with a year. James remembered everything as naturally as he breathed. 15 years in cybersecurity turn a man into a scanner. He collects data even when he doesn't mean to. Even while watching television in the common room, out of the corner of his eye, he could see the duty nurse entering a code on a laptop. The staff considered him an odd old man with military habits. He insisted they call him Lieutenant Colonel Miller, not Grandpa and not James. That brought out indulgent smiles from the aides and nurses, who whispered at the nurses' station, "Our general is acting up again." Let them whisper. A man no one takes seriously sees what everyone else misses. James had not learned that from books. He had learned it on night raids, where the one who survived was often the one the enemy had stopped watching. One morning, he caught Emily, a young nurse from the 2nd floor, at the door of a patient's room. "Emily, hold on. What's in that syringe?" "Insulin, Colonel Miller." "Everything's according to the chart. Mrs. Harris's blood sugar is 58. That's already on the edge. Insulin right now would be the finishing shot. Coma first, then intensive care if you got her there in time." "Did you look at the chart before starting the procedure?" Emily froze with her hand extended. She looked down at the chart and her face slowly drained. She ran to the charge nurse. An hour later, she came back, unable to meet his eyes. "Thank you, Colonel Miller. You saved us." "Lieutenant Colonel Miller," he corrected without pressure. "And teach yourself to read the instructions before you inject anything. That is not friendly advice. That is an order." 18 months, 546 days of waking up at 5 in the morning, drinking weak tea, observing and waiting. James did not know exactly what he was waiting for, but he waited with the patience forged by 3 sleepless nights in an ambush position outside Kandahar, lying on frozen ground because the commander had said wait and had not named an end time. The Army teaches one essential skill: readiness without an expiration date. The call came at 4:53. The night nurse, sleepy and wrapped in a wrinkled robe, knocked on his door. "Colonel Miller, wake up. The hospital's calling. They say something happened to your daughter." He took the phone and listened while standing barefoot on the cold tile. The voice on the other end delivered the standard wording. Sarah Carter had been brought into the emergency department at Springfield General. Fall down the stairs. Multiple bruises. A fracture. Fall down the stairs. James hung up and stood motionless for 3 seconds. In Army hospitals, he had seen dozens of such falls. Victims always slipped. They always hit the doorframe. They were always so clumsy, especially when the husband was standing in the hallway, hearing every word. He dialed a number he had remembered for 26 years. "Charlie, it's Miller. Can you hear me?" A pause on the other end. 1 second and no more. Then came a voice that was no longer young either, but sharp, instantly awake. "James, is that you? How many years has it been? What happened?" "Sarah is in your hospital in emergency. I need you to arrange an urgent inpatient consultation for me right now. James, wait." Aren't you locked away in that place? They won't just let you walk out. Charlie, issue the referral immediately. Dr. Charles Bennett, chief of surgery at Springfield General, did not ask another question. Between them stood a night outside Kandahar when James had spent 3 hours clamping Charlie's femoral artery with the torn hem of his own uniform, while mortar fire kept everyone's heads down and the medics could not crawl any closer. Some debts are not written down on paper, and they do not expire. 40 minutes later, a medical transport stopped in front of the assisted living facility. The administrator, a soft, doughy man in a stretched-out sweater, rushed out of his office waving a folder. "Where do you think you're going? I have clear instructions from Todd Parker. No outings without his personal approval." The driver held out a document stamped and signed by the chief of surgery. "This is an emergency medical transfer. You want to argue with the head of surgery? Call the number on the form. Right now, stop interfering with work." The administrator looked at the stamp, then at James, then back at the stamp. James walked past him with only his wallet and the clothes on his back. When he entered the hospital room, he immediately gripped the metal rail of the bed so hard his fingers cramped. Sarah lay on her back, small and motionless beneath a thin hospital blanket. Her left eye was swollen shut, purple-black and completely closed. Her arm was in a cast from wrist to elbow. On her neck were marks too clear, too even, with the familiar spaces between them. 4 fingers and a thumb. James read that pattern instantly, the way he read terrain on a map, the way he had learned to read wounded bodies in field hospitals. A fracture, multiple bruises, a cracked rib, a concussion. Sarah, baby girl. Dad. She moved and immediately grimaced, pressing her good hand to her side. "I just slipped on the stairs. My heel gave out. Can you imagine how stupid that was?" "Sarah, look at me." One word was enough, one commander's look, the kind of look that, for 30 years, had made subordinates snap straight. Later, in civilian life, it made young programmers check their code for the 3rd time. He sat on the edge of the bed and placed his palm beside her casted hand without touching it, so he would not cause her pain. "It was Mark," she said quietly, "and his mother, and Denise too." She did not tell it all at once. It came in pieces with broken breathing, stopping whenever her ribs would not let her inhale fully. "He's always on his phone, playing around with these trading apps. While I'm at work, he's supposedly making a fortune. He took out loans, lost everything, and then dug himself into new debt. And in the evenings, he has his meetings at his friend Bryce's lake house. Poker, whist sets. He stumbles in at dawn destroyed, angry, empty, and somehow I'm to blame for the whole world." She swallowed. "He cleaned out the accounts, Dad. I checked a month ago. 0. Nothing. And every time he loses again, he comes back home." She fell silent. On the wall, across from the bed, a round hospital clock ticked steadily. "Keep going," James said. "The first time," he cried, "he crawled on his knees and promised he would hurt himself if I left. He swore on our daughter. He swore to God it would never happen again. And I believed him, Dad. Like the biggest fool in the world, I believed him." Her voice broke. "Then it became normal, and every time it got worse. His mother moved in almost as soon as they sent you to that facility. Denise, his sister, came too with her son. They turned the house into headquarters. They give orders like I'm their maid. Patricia screams at me over every little thing. The soup isn't salty enough. There's dust on the baseboards. I'm ruining her son's life and driving him to these outbursts." And Denise just smirks and tells Mark, "I need to be kept on a short leash because I've started thinking I have freedom." James said nothing. Not a single muscle moved in his face. Only the hand lying on his knee slowly tightened into a fist, then just as slowly opened again. Yesterday, he completely lost it. He'd lost a lot. He came home at 2 in the morning. I didn't even have time to get out of bed. Patricia and Denise came in with him, Dad. They just held my arm so he could hit me without trouble. His mother grabbed my left arm. Denise grabbed my right. I tried to scream, and his mother hissed in my ear, "Shut up! Don't embarrass yourself in front of the neighbors." Sarah turned toward the wall. For several seconds, nothing could be heard in the room but her breathing, short, careful breaths protecting broken ribs. Then her voice became so quiet, James had to lean in to hear. "And there's more. Denise's son, Tyler, is 12. He torments Ava. He shoves her, takes her toys, calls her names every day, Dad. Ava came to me crying and begged me to do something. When I tried to talk to Denise, Patricia cut me off. She said, 'Stop raising that child to be a doormat. She needs character.'" Denise laughed. Mark was sitting right there and didn't even turn his head. James sat on the edge of the bed, back straight, breathing even. From the outside, one might have thought he was calm, just an elderly man visiting his daughter in the hospital. "And one more thing," Sarah turned back, wincing from the pain in her ribs. "About a year ago, I accidentally heard Patricia yelling on the phone in the kitchen. She thought nobody was home, but I came back from work early. She was shouting at someone from the bank about certificates of deposit, accounts, deadlines. It was about money from her late husband, Mark's father. Mark doesn't even know about it. She never mentioned it around him. There are maybe $700,000, maybe more. She hid it in accounts under the name of some distant relative." James remained silent. Outside the hospital room, morning brightened. A pale strip of light crept across the linoleum. "Dad, don't go after them. Mark will." "Sarah," he interrupted. 30 years did not wear out my pants in office chairs, and a year and a half in that godforsaken nursing home did not erase my memory. I still remember which side of a rifle the safety is on. But you're alone, and there are 3 of them in that house. I've handled crowds thicker than that by myself. And what do we have here? A stock market genius who only fights women, his mother with the manners of an empress, and his sister doing backup vocals. I've walked into messes in Kandahar that made that viper pit look like a preschool pageant. And as you can see, I even kept my own teeth. Kandahar was 40 years ago. Skills are not meatloaf. They don't spoil. They just sit in cans until needed. Sarah wanted to argue, but one tear rolled down the side of her face where the skin was still untouched. James covered her good hand with his palm and held it for 1 second without moving. "Where is Ava?" he asked. "At home, with them." "Understood. Listen to the plan. You stay here. Bennett will write up a concussion so convincing no one will discharge you without an escort. And I'm going to pay a visit to the family nest. Dad, please. Your Mark is about to gain some clarity. An old wolf is not a sofa cushion. He made a bad mistake, confusing me with a lapdog." He bent down and touched his lips to her forehead, just above the right eyebrow, where the skin was clean and unhurt. Sarah closed her eye. James left the room without looking back. If he had looked back, he might have stayed, and he could not afford to stay. Sarah had given him a spare key to the house before the assisted living facility, and he had carried it on his key ring for all 18 months. A small brass key the facility administrator had not even thought to take away. After all, why would an old man need a key to someone else's house? A cab took him to the suburbs in 20 minutes. James walked in and stopped in the entryway. The living room looked as if its occupants had declared a personal vendetta against cleaning. Delivery boxes covered the coffee table. Dirty plates sat on the windowsill. Empty bottles lined the baseboard. The carpet was stained with substances he chose not to identify. Two women sat on a sagging couch in front of a television blaring a daytime talk show. Patricia Carter glanced at him without turning her head. "Sarah's not here. You can sleep on the fold-out cot. The kitchen's a mess. Make yourself useful." "Patricia," James said, taking off his jacket, "the ruin in this house isn't limited to the closets. It's in the heads too. But fine, we'll start with the dust." "What?" He did not answer, because from somewhere deeper in the house, he heard a quiet, muffled sob. The kind of sound made by a child who has long since learned not to cry out loud, because loud crying gets punished. James walked past both women, down the hallway, past the kitchen, to a little room against the back wall. It looked more like a storage closet with a window. The door was half open. In the corner, on the bare floor, with her back pressed against the wall, sat a girl, thin, pale, dark half-moons under her eyes, wearing a washed-out t-shirt that did not fit her. In her hands, she held a headless doll. She was not looking at James, but through him, at some point, only she could see. James crouched down and opened his mouth. Before he could speak, a boy flew into the room. Big for 12, tall, with that cocky certainty in his eyes that belongs to children no one has ever stopped. "Crying again," he snapped at Ava. Without noticing James, he yanked the doll out of her hands. Ava made a short, thin sound, like a kitten whose paw had been stepped on, but she did not fight back. The boy grabbed the doll by its remaining arm and started twisting. James caught his wrist. He did not squeeze. He simply closed his fingers around it and fixed it in place like a door lock. "Listen, hero," he said softly. "Have you ever tried twisting the arm of someone who can tie your spine in a knot?" Tyler jerked, tried to pull away, and failed. His eyes widened. "Let go. Who even are you?" "I'm Ava's grandfather. I'm still waiting for an answer to my question, preferably a clear one. I didn't do anything. She did it herself." "So she handed you the doll herself and tearfully begged you to dismember it. That's a thriller plot. Give a version closer to reality." The doll fell from the boy's fingers and hit the floor. James released his wrist, picked up the doll, and handed it back to Ava. Denise appeared in the doorway, thin, sharp-faced, her mouth twisted, her fingers were spread, nails aimed at his face. "What are you doing, old man?" James stepped to the side, caught her wrist with one short movement, and pressed his thumb lightly into the point between the bones. Pain shot through her arm from wrist to elbow. Denise gasped and stumbled back into the wall. "That hurts. You broke my hand." "Your hand is alive and well. If it were broken, you wouldn't be complaining. You'd be cracking the walls with a sound only dogs could hear. That was simply a request to behave yourself. The gentlest one in my arsenal." Patricia rushed in from the living room. In her right hand, she held a decorative fireplace poker, cast iron with a fancy handle. "I'll show you, old." "Patricia," James said, catching the poker mid-swing and pulling it from her fingers. "Careful with antiques. Heavy thing. You'll give yourself a hernia. And no bank account will save you." She stumbled forward from the momentum and nearly fell. James walked to the brick fireplace, braced the poker against the edge, and bent it with both hands. The metal groaned, gave way, and arched. He laid the bent poker on the table in front of the two women. Silence. "We are establishing curfew and 3 rules," James said in the same quiet voice. "First, Ava is now a crystal vase to you. Do not breathe on her, do not glare at her, and certainly do not touch her. Second, ignore me. It's better for your health, keeps the blood pressure steady. Third, we're declaring a house cleaning day. Denise, you take the vacuum and wage war on that carpet until victory. Patricia, Your front line is the mountain of dishes in the kitchen. And our young naturalist here will sit in a chair and reflect on why hurting the weak is a rotten idea. And if we don't? Patricia asked, but her voice trembled, and the question sounded less like defiance than reconnaissance. Then I move on to the cultural program. Compared to that, a deep cleaning will feel like a spa vacation. Take my word for it. You won't enjoy it. Tyler opened his mouth, then looked at his mother for support. Denise stayed silent, massaging her numb hand. Tyler closed his mouth and sat down. Half an hour later, the vacuum was running in the living room. Water ran in the kitchen. James sat on the edge of the bathtub and washed Ava's hair with warm water, carefully untangling the mats with his fingers. The girl did not move. She sat in the warm water with her knees pulled to her chin and stared at the foam. "Ava," he said softly, "when was the last time you ate something normal? Did anyone give you anything hot in this house?" Silence. "Let me tell you a secret. When your mom was your age, she hated shampoo more than oatmeal. She used to hide under the bed. Thought I couldn't find her there. But her heels were sticking out. Gave away the little saboteur every time." Ava did not answer, but she turned her head slightly toward him. It was not much, but it was something. In the dresser in the guest room, he found clean pajamas folded so neatly it was clear no one had touched them in months. He made the bed, tucked Ava in, covered her with a blanket, and then returned to the kitchen. Mark's laptop sat open on the table. The screen had not gone dark. The session was still active. Trading platform tabs spread across the browser like a fan. Beside them was a messenger window with a conversation the owner had not bothered to hide. Patricia's phone was charging near the outlet sticking out of her unzipped purse. James sat down at the table. 15 years in cybersecurity. That was not a line on a resume. It was a reflex stitched into the spine. Mark considered himself a competent user because he knew how to download an app. He had no idea how much information he left behind, open, unprotected, available to anyone who knew where to look. In a kitchen drawer, among batteries and old receipts, James found a flash drive with the logo of an insurance company. In 40 minutes, while the vacuum droned in the living room, he copied the message history, screenshots from the trading platform, and statements from Mark's work email. From Patricia's phone, he photographed the screen with the banking notifications. By the time Denise turned off the vacuum, James had a full set of evidence in his hands. And the Carter family had no idea. He cooked dinner himself. He found potatoes in the refrigerator, frozen hamburger patties in the freezer, and a bottle of oil on a shelf. "Well, you can cook a little," Denise said, picking at a patty with her fork. "Sarah always overcooked everything. Sarah worked like a draft horse for the 5 of you after 12-hour shifts." James replied, without looking up from his plate. "It's a miracle she set the table for you at all, instead of dumping your food straight into a trough. If I were you, I'd chew quietly." Denise choked. Patricia looked sideways at him, but said nothing. Tyler, emboldened by dinner, began telling his mother how he took things from younger kids at school, proud and waiting for praise. "And I threw Pete's backpack in the trash. He didn't even squeak, a true titan," James said. "Was the backpack heavy or empty?" "It had textbooks," Tyler answered, missing the trap. "So not just robbery, but sabotage against education. You're growing up to be a real helper for your mother. With a portfolio like that, any alley would snatch you up." Tyler fell silent, sensing he was being praised the wrong way, but not understanding where the mockery was hidden. Denise snutted and muttered something about client databases at work, the ones she had access to. "You never know when that kind of thing might come in handy." she said. Sound thinking? James nodded. Federal trade secret violations. Depending on the details, that can earn you fines and even prison time. But you're right. Everything has a use around the house, even a criminal record. Denise stared at him, opened her mouth, and closed it again. While chewing her patty, Patricia announced that Mark would be home late. He was at Bryce's lake house again and would probably stay until morning. Bryce, James repeated. Is that the one with more debt than conscience, or the one who did time for assault? Patricia froze. How do you know about Bryce? Patricia, there's a wagon load of free time in a government-funded old folks' warehouse. Nothing to do except remember the biographies of the people who packaged me there. I took inventory of your connections. Very educational. Every word spoken at that table, James stored in his memory like a round in a magazine. Schedules, habits, weaknesses, routines. People at dinner do not watch their tongues. He watched every word. At 9 that evening, he returned to the guest room where Ava was lying. On a shelf, he found an old children's book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, with folded corners and a torn cover. He sat on the edge of the bed and began to read aloud. Ava lay on her side, the blanket pulled up to her chin, watching him with the wary look of a child who had learned too early that adults could not be trusted. James finished the chapter, closed the book, and adjusted the blanket. Rest, Ava. He stood and took a step toward the door. Then he heard a quiet, hoarse voice, each word spoken as if it cost her a separate effort. Grandpa, will you stay? James stopped. 3 words. The first word she had spoken all day. He turned, came back to the bed, and lowered himself to one knee so his eyes were level with hers. I'll stay, he said, and from now on everything will be different. Do you hear me? Life is going to follow another script. And if they don't want it different, then we'll have to change the scenery without them. Ava did not answer, but her hand, small, thin, with bitten nails, slipped out from under the blanket and rested in his palm. James covered her fingers with his and sat that way until his granddaughter's breathing grew even and she fell asleep. He carefully freed his hand, straightened up, and went into the hallway. He left the door cracked so light would fall across the threshold, and the girl, if she woke, would know she was not alone. In the hallway, he stood for a minute, listening to the breathing behind the door. Then he walked into the kitchen. He closed Mark's laptop and pushed it aside. Everything he needed had already been copied. The clock showed 10. James poured himself water, drank it, and waited. Patricia and Denise retreated to their rooms. Around 11, silently, not looking at him and not looking at each other. It was the kind of silence that comes not after a quarrel, but after surrender, when the defeated still have not decided what to do next. The car pulled up a little after 1. James heard it long before it stopped, the roaring engine, the squeal of brakes, silence, then heavy, uneven steps on gravel. The front door was not opened. It was kicked. Mark Carter spilled into the entryway the way a cabinet would fall if cabinets could drink and lose money. Tall, broad-shouldered, bloated, with his shirt unbuttoned, and a red face on which everything was written clearly. Whiskey, loss, rage, and another woman's perfume. "Sarah," he barked into the dark house, "bring me food." James rose from the kitchen table and walked unhurriedly into the hallway. His figure in the half-dark looked almost carved from stone. Sarah's not here. She went to the hospital. Mark narrowed his eyes, trying to focus on the unexpected guest. He swayed and quickly braced his palm against the wall, leaving a damp print on the paint. What the hell is this supposed to be? Your personal nightmare, or your father-in-law, James Miller? Pick whichever scares you more. Ah, Mark's smile twisted, showing his teeth. the old man from the nursing home Sarah always whines about. Listen, Pops, nice little courtesy visit. Now get out. Move toward the door while I'm still feeling generous. I like the wall color. I think I'll stay. Mark blinked. The word stay hung in the air, short as a gunshot, and clearly had no intention of leaving. He was not used to being contradicted, especially by people he considered lower than himself on the food chain. And lower than himself included everyone except perhaps his buddies with lake houses and poker tables. The swing came drunkenly wide and heavy. James simply shifted half a step aside, as if making room for him to pass. Mark's fist cut through empty air. Momentum dragged his bulky body forward. His boot caught the leg of a small table, and his shoulder hit the wall with a dull thud. For 1 second he stood there, forehead pressed to the wallpaper, shaking his head in confusion. Then a growl tore out of his throat, deep and almost animal. He charged again, arms spread wide, hoping to crush James by sheer weight. James calmly lifted his phone. A red recording light pulsed on the screen. Say hello to the camera, Mark. It'll be useful for the family archive. You're very photogenic in profile. Mark froze mid-step in a ridiculous pose, disheveled, eyes bloodshot. In that instant, he looked both pathetic and dangerous. I've been filming a documentary since you came through the door, James said. Working title, Drunk Rampage. Attack on a senior citizen, the full set. In about half a minute, the video goes to the cloud. You can break the phone over your knee if you want. The recording is already on its way to the right people. The police department will enjoy the screening. He paused. So breathe out and don't ruin the shot. Mark slowly, almost reluctantly, lowered his hands. Sit down. No extra movements. Your legs look like they're negotiating separate lives right now. Mark dropped onto a chair, not out of obedience. His legs had simply turned to cotton from the mixture of alcohol, rage, and a new sticky feeling he had not yet recognized as fear. I read your laptop in my spare time, James said. Fascinating material, better than the evening news. Those tabs of yours are a holiday display. Trading apps, your buddy Bryce, work email. You skimmed from clients at your firm 7 times in 4 months. Does your boss know what kind of gifted financier he has under his roof? Or is this your personal method for funding poker? Mark went still. In a matter of seconds, his face took on the color of wet cardboard. No blood, no arrogance left. But that's just the warm-up. Here's the main surprise. $650,000 from your father's estate. Your mother has been sitting on it like a greedy hen on golden eggs. Meanwhile, you've been losing your last dollar at poker and beating your wife over an empty refrigerator, while she fed you stories about how there was no money. She advised you to win it back, didn't she? And all the while she was warming herself on bags of cash. Educational parenting style, I'll give her that. Mark slowly turned his head toward the stairs. He looked as if rusty gears had just begun grinding inside his skull. You're lying, he rasped. You'll see for yourself in the morning. For now, listen to the evacuation plan. Tomorrow you sign consent to the divorce. Ava stays with her mother. You walk off into the sunset and stop appearing in their lives. Compensation comes from your mother's stash. That's her entrance fee into a quiet old age. Either she shares voluntarily, or I hand over her accounts to the IRS and to Sarah's attorney. Choose. A portion goes to your family, or all of it risks going to the government. I give you my word as an officer. You sign, and I keep quiet. You don't, and tomorrow your biography is hanging on the honor wall at the police department and on your boss's desk. And if I sign, what guarantee do I have that you won't turn me in anyway? My word weighs more than your booze breath. In 30 years of service, it never misfired once. Ask anyone who stood in formation with me." Mark sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. At last he nodded, heavily, like an old garage door. "Crawl to bed. Sleep on your side so you don't choke. At least then you'll breathe more evenly." Mark got up and trudged upstairs. His steps, uncertain and stumbling, were no longer the steps of a master of the universe. They were the gait of a tenant who had just been handed an eviction notice. In the morning, James got up at 5. Built over decades, he made breakfast for Ava: golden scrambled eggs, toast, and sweet tea. The girl ate with quiet concentration, dipping bread into the yolk while James sat across from her with a mug of coffee, protecting her silent peace. Around 10, Patricia and Denise appeared in the kitchen. They looked wrinkled, stripped of yesterday's polish and former venom. Patricia lowered herself into a chair and folded her hands stiffly. "Let's discuss everything like civilized people," she began. James took a sip of coffee, set down the mug, and turned the laptop screen toward her. "Account number. Amount. Name of the nominee on the account." Patricia's eyes locked onto the numbers. Her mouth opened soundlessly, but no words came. At that moment, Mark entered, painfully sober, gray-faced, deep shadows under his eyes. He read the text over his mother's shoulder and looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. $650,000, he said, his voice cracking. "Dad's inheritance. And you spent 2 years telling me we were broke. You pushed me to win back my debts. You watched me take out loans. You watched me hurt Sarah." He cut himself off. "And all this time you had money, my money. Mark, you don't understand. It was an emergency reserve for a rainy day." "A rainy day." Mark suddenly laughed, short and bitter, and there was more pain in that sound than in any scream. "Mom, the last 2 years have been pitch black night." He looked at James. "Where are the papers, old man?" James placed a folder on the table. Mark sat and began to sign. Consent to the divorce, agreement on the child's primary residence, waiver of property claims. Everything was quick, almost mechanical. All that remained was to file in family court, and with mutual consent, the matter could be settled in one hearing. Then, James turned to Patricia and placed a separate page in front of her. "Payment agreement. This is your bill for damages. Sign it, or I'll shake your inheritance so hard there won't be dust left." She stayed silent for a long time. A minute, maybe 2, studying the pattern on the tablecloth. Then she picked up the pen. Her fingers trembled noticeably, and the signature came out broken, foreign-looking. "Plain extortion," she hissed, pushing the paper away. "Fair accounting, Patricia. At the wholesale price, no less. I could have cleaned you out completely. Be grateful." Mark finished with the documents without looking at anyone. He went upstairs, and 20 minutes later came back down with a bag. He left the house without another word. Patricia and her daughter took longer to pack. Denise dragged suitcases while yanking a frightened Tyler by the arm. At the very threshold, Mark's mother turned and looked at James. There was so much poison in her gaze it would have been enough for a small army. "You won't get away with this." "That's possible, but I certainly won't be answering to your company." By noon, the house was quiet. James washed the dishes, wiped the table dry, and stepped out onto the porch. Ava appeared beside him without a sound and trustingly slipped her small hand into his. 6 weeks later, James warmed his hands around a cup of coffee in a new apartment. The bright 2-bedroom place on the 3rd floor was filled with morning sunlight. Sarah was recovering. The cast had finally come off. Little by little, the hunted shadow James hated so much was disappearing from her face. From Ava's room came laughter. She was playing with new toys. Every time James heard that sound, he froze without meaning to, enjoying it like a rare melody. The phone vibrated on the table. The screen lit up with Todd Parker. "Colonel Miller," the stepson's voice shone with cheerfulness, and that false concern James now recognized without error. "You've completely disappeared. The facility says you went for an exam and never came back. We're worried. When should we expect you?" "Never, Todd. Find yourself another ATM." Silence. 3 seconds. "What do you mean, never?" "The plain meaning. My attorney, Rebecca Simmons, is already preparing a surprise for you. We're filing to recover everything you helped yourself to from my accounts over the last year and a half." "Yup. Your power of attorney was revoked through the notary the day before yesterday. An audit is already on its way, so you may want to start packing crackers for the road." "Colonel Miller, this is a misunderstanding. I only acted for your comfort. Listen closely. You stepped on the same rake as a certain character you don't know. Both of you decided that if a person is old, he's just furniture. Turns out the furniture had a bear trap inside. Honest mistake." James ended the call. From the child's room, Ava's laughter rang out again, clear and bright, like ice breaking on a spring river. James leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and simply listened. He was finally home. And maybe that is the part of this that stays with us longest. Not the revenge, not the documents, not even the fear on the faces of those who thought they could hurt the helpless forever, but the moment one wounded family finally breathed again. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in James's place, and whether you've ever seen karma arrive late but right on time. If this story moved you, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next one.